Welcome back to the channel in week 1 of the DLC. We had some extremely competitive games to kick off this season. Close calls on both sides, unexpected powerhouse mons emerging, and some insane RNG that completely flipped battles on their heads. If week 1 is any indicator of what we can expect over the coming weeks, we are in for quite the competition. So let's take a look at this week's matchups.
For our first matchup this week, we're taking a look at Tog versus QT. Both coaches look to gain an early lead for their league and set the pace for the rest of the week's games. Going into the battle, QT needed to be cautious of Tog's sand sweepers that could potentially outspeed his wall breakers if left unchecked, while Tog had to be wary of QT's oppressive offense, with Urshifu, Zarude, and Scizor looking especially threatening to this team. Let's go ahead and hop into the replay, where Tog will be joining us to share his thoughts on the game as well.
For the first matchup of the DLC, we have Tog versus QT, and we have Tog joining us today. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, doing all good.
You want to give an introduction on yourself for anyone who's not familiar?
I started draft in mid-June of last year, and I've been in VDL since, I think, August. I started in Season 2, and then I believe I became a mod after that. And I've been playing for VDL ever since.
So, Tog, I know you and your team have put in a lot of time into prepping this week. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what your game plan was going into this matchup, what 6 you were expecting QT to bring, and how this planned out for you?
Okay, so I knew going into this match, the game plan was going to be stalling with getting chip of sand, hazards, etc., and then just winning with a sweeper summon at the end. Or not even with a sweeper, just kind of just winning through chip. And then yeah, the 6 I was expecting were 5 of them were Spectra, Glamora, Zarude, Scizor, and Bellibolt. And then the 6 I was expecting to be either Meloetta or Whimsicott. I didn't see Urshifu coming at all because, it just looks so bad into Hydra Apple, Slowking, Quillfish, all those guys. So that was the only surprise.
So, Tog, after seeing the 6 that QT brought, was there anything that made you have to rethink your strategy going into this game?
I mean, just only thing I really had to do was be a little more careful about Urshifu because, I still had the Hydra Apple and Quillfish. So I was pretty much fine on that front, but main thing was just being more cautious around and not letting it just snipe something.
Now, in terms of the Bellibolt set that was brought, I know personally I did a lot of mocks with you, and it was kind of a consistent bring of a dual screen Bellibolt set, but obviously this set came a little bit differently. It was a toxic parabolic charge chilling water set. Did that throw you off at all by mocking, consistently seeing one set versus what was actually brought?
Definitely, yeah, it threw me off guard. I had to figure out the best way to try and I had to keep forcing it out or trying to get chip on it somehow, which of course Slackoff just completely nullified that. So I really want to at some point try and get a Barbarage on it to try and poison it. Obviously that didn't ever happen, but just get some kind of status on it was my main game plan at that point, which I think eventually I did lay to sleep on it with Yawn. And that kind of came dead weight after that point.
So obviously we can't talk about this game without some of the misses that happened here at the end with the heat waves and the final turns. Can you give us a little bit of insight to your thoughts there? Was there anything that you feel like you could have done differently earlier in the game to maybe would not have to rely on that as much?
I think, if I'll be completely honest, I don't think Iris made any major misplays up until the one misplay I made was at the very end when I clicked a Terra trying to play 50-50 and never existed, because I saw Scizor earlier in the game change moves when in fact it was banded, and Bullet Punch would not have killed if I did not Terra Hydra Apple into Rock at the end. I could have probably hit it and then would have just been Torn versus Urshifu at that point, which I believe it took an Ice Punch, so I had 2 chances to line up Bleak when at that point I had a much better shot of winning at that point.
So, Tog, given how the game played out this week, can we expect any potential changes in your strategy, your team going into week 2?
I think the strategy overall worked very well. I'm not upset. I'm quite happy with it as a strategy. It just unfortunately did not work out here because of, 2 heat wave misses mainly. And of course, bad play by me by Terraing.
So ultimately you think it's more of the RNG than what you brought?
Honestly, yeah, because, it's part of the game. I accept that, but I think, yeah. If I landed one of those heat waves, I would have had a much stronger chance of winning. Not of course to discount QT's win, of course, but realistically speaking.
Definitely a rough ending to what would be considered a really strong game from both of you guys. So I would agree with you. I think both strategies worked really well. I think both of you guys played a great game. Like you said, unfortunately just coming down to RNG, and that's just the game that gets played sometimes. But looking forward to seeing what both you guys can do in week 2.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to go moving forward.
Like we said, an unfortunate way to end what was otherwise an extremely competitive game. While QT had a commanding lead in the beginning stages, Tog was able to work his way back through his hazard stacking and phasing, being a strategy QT was clearly not ready for. With that though, Paldea United was up 1-0, and next up we have Starry versus AP.
Looking at these teams, neither side seemed to have an obvious advantage going into this battle. As Vortex and I discussed during the draft analysis, AP's combination of Gliscor and Goldago will be a formidable core going into Starry's team. On the other hand, Starry does have his Terra captain Jolteon, who can look to cause some major damage with Terra Ice and Alluring Voice, hitting a majority of AP's team super effectively. We weren't able to catch up with either coach this week for an interview, so Vortex, let's go ahead and take a look at how this game went. So we can see right from the start in this matchup that AP decided to not bring Gliscor this week in favor of bringing Hariyama, leading off with it right away to click Fake Out and safely activate its Guts ability.
Starry looks to swap in Great Tusk, but that is not the answer to Hariyama's Guts-boosted close combat, taking a huge chunk of damage. We then see exchanges of swap outs, with AP eventually securing 2 major knockouts against Great Tusk and Samurott.
At this point in the match, it's a game of sacking off mons to their opponent's special attackers, with Goldengo and Jolteon continuing to apply pressure as we discussed during the team preview.
In the final turns of the game, we see the duo of Hariyama and Goldengo clean up against the remaining members of Starry's team, and the latter outspeeding Enamorus and Jolteon thanks to its Choice Scarf.
After an unfortunate miss with Ceaseless Edge on the Clefable early on, Starry found himself in the back, having to attempt to wear down AP's main switch-ins without relying on the passive damage from spikes. While this may or may not have an impact on the result, this did allow AP to play more aggressively, which Starry was unable to keep up with. AP now secured the win for Paldea United, making a match point going into Game 3.
With Paldea United up 2-0, the VDL had their backs against the wall. Needing a win to keep in the race, we are taking a look at Matt versus Jake. With Matt having Raging Bolt as an option to benefit from either of Jake's field conditions, the VDL's hopes were not lost. Jake, on the other hand, looked to secure the victory for Paldea United by using his Rain offense to drown out Matt, not worrying about the potentially incoming Bolt as long as Iron Treads is still around to check it. We caught up with Matt after the game to answer a few questions as well. Our next match is Jake versus Matt, and Matt is joining us, going to answer a few questions. So if you want to introduce yourself for those who aren't familiar with you.
Sure. Hey, I'm Matt. On YouTube and other socials, I am It's Just Matt. I am a coach and a mod in the VDL. I've only really started playing Draft League like this year-ish, but I've been watching forever, as long as I can remember.
So Matt, tell us a little bit about your game plan this week, kind of what you prepped, what were you expecting, what do you think about this week's matchup?
For sure. I mean, I think on paper this was probably my toughest matchup out of all the teams as they are right now. I've never built with the Screens team before, so that was super fun to build with. But my main game plan was how many times can I get Cryogonal and Trevenant in and just hit stuff. Like, that was it. Jake's team had some great hazard removal, so I couldn't really go down that route. I was just like, let's get Cryogonal in and hit some stuff. Grimmsnar's had a bunch of like really intricate EVs this week to live specific sets, and just with a really simple reflect light screen set, it was get it in, parting shot it out, or have like a slow switch on something, and we rock and roll from there.
Yeah, you mentioned that Jake's team being the hardest matchup. What 6 were you expecting him to bring? Was this about what you prepped for, or did anything you think feel like catch you off guard?
Jake's team is so interesting because it's a Rain team that never has to bring Rain. It's so strong outside of it as well. And I fully did not expect Rain this week because my Raging Bolt scares it out. And he brought Rain. And that was just, I prepped for it, but not what I was expecting at all. Definitely knew Treads, Valiant, and Archaludon were coming no matter what. Those things were so scary for me to prep. And it spent so long trying to figure it out. Was pretty surprised Rotom Heat and Brambleghast didn't show up. I get not bringing them during Rain, but they look pretty strong in my team. And I never expected the Iron Jugulis. I just feel like it didn't match up well in my team, but it came and it put in a ton of work, so it was a good bring. But if Rain was going to come, Pelipper, Kingdra always come, and then it's just that 6 mon that you have to fill.
Now, getting into the actual match itself, on turn 3, you Terra'd your Cryogonal into a ground type, which I found a little shocking, especially because at that point in the match, you hadn't figured out that it was a physical Kingdra yet. What was the thought process behind that?
So I knew in all of my EV spread and stuff, I knew I could not safely keep Cryogonal in against Kingdra at any point without knowing if it's physical or special, because I know both sets were scary. And honestly, I built Trevenant to not have to Terra this week, and Cryogonal was always going to Terra to get the kill on the Iron Treads. That is 100% the only reason I brought Terra ground. I saw that a Freeze Dry into a Terra Blast ground would kill seeing the Treads EVs, and I saw the kill and I took it. I don't think they were going to expect it to be able to kill that way. I am max special attack modest from my calcs with how much damage Freeze Dry did. It was always taking that mon down, and then being able to take out Iron Treads means I can get Spikes and Stealth Rock up at any point in the game. Their only hazard removal at that point was going to be gone, and I thought that was going to be super helpful just to get chip on stuff to allow some more kills from my Cryogonal or my Trevenant or my Conkeldurr later on in the game.
Matt, like you said, both teams had some really cool prep this week. You obviously put a lot of thought bought into some of these sets and really played it out. Even with all that prep coming down to those final few turns of the match, between Valiant, Jugulus versus Grimmsnarl, Deoxys, Trevenant, what was going through your mind in these final turns? Did you feel like you were in control of everything?
I really felt like it could have been 50-50. I spent a long time trying to figure out what do I need to kill with my Deoxys and what do I need to kill with my Trevenant. The Iron Jugulus, the thing that I didn't think was going to come, was what was terrifying me the most, because I had already Terra'd on my Cryogonal, right? If I went Terra Fairy, that's not a problem, but I knew that I only really had one more opportunity to get a Reflect Up with my Grimmsnarl before it fell, before it was just my Deoxys and Trevenant. And honestly, I knew I had to get enough damage on Valiant and Jugulus with my Deoxys before I brought Trevenant in, so I could kill with the Woodhammer, but I still thought, on the last turn of the game, I lost, because if they brought Hurricane on that set and I never found their fourth move, Trevenant goes down no matter what, seeing the amount of damage other stuff done. So I fully thought I lost on that last turn, and then I see that they went for Dark Pulse instead. I didn't get the flinch and I got the Woodhammer kill. I have never had a 0-0 game, which is funny, but fully up until that last turn, I didn't think I was going to make it out. I was just going to hope that like a Hurricane missed or something.
Yeah, it's an exciting way to start off week 1 with a 0-0 victory at the end for the VDL. So that's an awesome game. Glad it came out so well.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us today, Matt. Really appreciate it. And I'm wishing you the best of luck on the rest of the season.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited. This is such a cool format.
With a crucial misplay from Jake in the final moments, all was not lost, and the VDL still had a chance to come back with Matt's victory. While the last-minute decision from Matt to bench Raging Bull this week may have been questionable, you can't argue with the results. With the VDL now on the board 2-1, we go into Tom versus Techno.
In a battle of competing champions, Tom and Techno both stared down fierce competition. Tom's blend of powerful attackers in Dragapult, Sneasler, and Entei, and defensive backbone in Ting Lu and Alola Mola looks to be an intimidating matchup for Techno. On the other side, Techno's combination of Ursaluna and Meowscarada threatened much of Tom's roster this week. With the VDL looking to Tom to ride the wave of momentum from Matt, let's get into the replay where we're joined by Tom. With the VDL in a rough 2-1 position, we have Tom versus Techno, and Tom's going to be joining us today. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself for anyone who isn't familiar with you?
G'day everyone, I'm Tom. I'm the first ever VDL champion. Season 1 of the VDL was my first ever draft league, and I've played in every season since, and I've been loving it so far.
Now, what was your game plan going into this match? Because I know Hitmonlee looks like a huge threat to your team.
Yeah, so my game plan was essentially to spread status with Entei and used dual screens on Dragapult to really hinder his offense. A lot of very strong physical hitting Pokemon on Techno's side. Essentially wanted to do that so that Sneasler could clean up late game. But yeah, it didn't quite work out how I planned it to go.
And then what 6 were you expecting from Techno?
I was expecting almost the exact 6 he brought. I did, however, expect Hitmonlee to come. Hitmonlee was a complete powerhouse in mocks. I thought it would come over either Meowscarada or Lantern. However, it didn't, which I was quite pleased to see. However, it didn't affect the outcome of the battle, so maybe it was the correct decision for Techno.
And were there any mistakes that you made during this battle that you think could have changed the outcome?
Yeah, there was actually. So I made a huge mistake with Entei turn 13 or 14. I didn't pay notice to Grassy Terrain healing Rillaboom first, so I assumed that my Entei would be faster. I didn't actually speed creep Rillaboom. In mocks, every set that I faced was max HP, max attack. And huge props to Techno for noticing that the Grassy Terrain healed him first, because that's actually a mechanic that I'd never really paid much attention to, so that's a learning experience for me. Yeah, so because of that, Entei went down really early, which was kind of crucial for my game plan, and I was on the back foot after that.
Now that leads me right into my next question. Once Entei was gone, did you think you could still win this? Did Sneasler still look good, or were you really relying on Entei to get you through this?
No, I absolutely still thought I could win. Entei was mainly just built to chip things down early for Sneasler. Without that, I just needed to try to proceed to get that chip on a few certain things, the Colossal being one of them. I was able to mostly do that with the spikes with Ting Lu, but I just didn't quite get enough chip on certain things, because yeah, Techno's positioning didn't allow me to do so. He played very well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the positioning was really the outcome of this battle, as he just positioned himself a lot better than you could, and he was kind of predicting a lot of your switches as well.
Absolutely.
Now my final question is, at the end of the battle, why did you click Dire Claw against that that Ursaluna Blood Moon instead of Close Combat when I'm pretty sure that would have KO'd?
Well, I took a bit of a gamble. I was almost certain the Ursaluna would be Choppleberry since I hadn't, there was no item revealed on it yet. The only thing I could think of was maybe an Assault Vest. I can't remember what moves it revealed, but I was certain it was going to be Choppleberry. It made the most sense in my mind. So I knew that if I CC'd, it was Choppleberry, I lose. And I knew that once Ursaluna was gone, Sneasler had a chance. So I banked on getting a sleep with Direclaw. It was a gamble, and yeah, it unfortunately didn't pay off.
And it was Choppleberry in the end, correct?
It did end up being Choppleberry, yes.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me today, and I wish you the best of luck for next week.
Thank you very much.
And with a convincing win from Techno, Paldea United secured the Week 1 victory. With lessons learned for the VDL, Tom and company will look to rebound in Week 2. However, that's not the final match we have here today. While it may not impact the week's final score, we have an owner versus owner showdown, myself versus Vortex. Let's take a look at this final match of Week 1.
Obviously, both myself and BP already know what 6 we each plan to bring, and do not want to spoil any of our thoughts as we review the replay. However, in this brief overview of the matchup this week, we have my threatening duo of Ogerpon and Walking Wake, which BP has very little countermeasure to. However, I had to contend with a Florges with the potential that Terra is a better answer to Wake, as well as Quaquavel's ability to snowball late game. Without further delay, let's dive into the final battle for bragging rights.
So in the last matchup for Week 1, we have what is perhaps the most poetic matchup possible. Owner of Paldea United, owner of VDL, myself versus Vortex. Vortex, looking into this matchup, what 6 were you expecting me to bring when you were prepping this week?
So when I look into your team, Garchomp was 100% coming as kind of like an Ogerpon check. I very much feared Quaquavel as it kind of just got out of control very quickly with my team, especially with how weak to water and fighting I am. Floor just made a ton of sense, especially as a Terra captain. I 100% expected either Terra water or ground to come in, especially to nuke my Torkoal. Iron Moth made a ton of sense. Same with Hydreigon. The last slot I was kind of up in the air with. I could see Corviknight coming for like a defog kind of sense, but at the same time it didn't match up too well. Rabombi made sense for webs, so I think Rabombi is probably the 6 that I was most likely expecting, but there wasn't anything I was really counting out besides for Carkol. With those 6 I was expecting, why did you decide to bring things like Meowstic and Lurantis?
No, it's a really good question, and honestly, a lot of thought had to go into this team this week. I was terrified of Ogerpon and Wake, because in practice, those 2 absolutely demolished my team. You were absolutely right in the sense of Garchomp. Garchomp was a must-bring just as my one of only few counters into Ogerpon. Nothing else on my team truly wanted to eat anything, especially some boosted Ivy Cudgels, Power Whips. That thing was terrifying. You had mentioned Hydreigon, Corviknight, Rabombi, all of which on paper had some similar matchups or some interesting ones to look at, but just when it came to practice, none of those really matched up well against your 2 heavy hitters.
Now, why did you decide to bring Terra Electric Lurantis? I was highly expecting a water or ground Florges to nuke Torkoal, as I previously said, so the electric very much threw me off. What was your thought process there?
It's really funny, actually, because you're exactly right. I started off with Terra Water Florges because I was one of the few things that I felt confident could take hits from Wake. And then what really became a problem when I was mocking some of these battles out was actually Thunderwave Screamtail. That thing was just a menace to my team. So by the time I had anything in place to actually try to revert sweep, it was already paralyzed and I couldn't play it. So Terra Electric Lurantis was there honestly just as a Thunderwave answer. Ended up working out really well. Lastly, I just want to get your thoughts. Seeing as you committed your team to a more sun-based playstyle, even though it's not the only thing your team can do, what are your thoughts on Torkoal as a must-bring when you do commit to sun?
I honestly find it a little bit difficult. I went through a few different phases when building this team this week. Originally, I had Torkoal on there, and at one point I opted to remove it to put Palossand on there because I was having such a hard time with Quaquavel. And then I ultimately, through some more testing, figured out that I was not able to get my sun up efficiently enough between, I think at the time I had Screamtail and Terapagos both running Sunny Day, and it felt like I was just in this endless loop of swapping my defensive Pokemon around to eat hits while also trying to like wish up with Screamtail, and I just never found an opportunity to get sun up, so I really had to rely on Torkoal to do that. But besides for the fact that Torkoal sets Sun, it's pretty useless. Like, it sets rocks and it can remove rocks, but it doesn't have the stats to back it up. It's got a huge defense stat, but everyone really is aware of that, so they kind of prep around it, whether it's bringing special attacks or even just bringing trapping, which is something I know I've done multiple times in the past to remove Torkoals. So I don't think it's the greatest thing in the world. I honestly think Ninetales is a bit better just due to its offensive pressure.
Do you feel like, given how the team performed this week, do you see yourself making any changes going into week 2?
I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, this team just doesn't fit my playstyle the way that I maybe thought it would have, and we don't get enough transactions during this season for me to really try to alter the fact that this is a Sun team. I think I just need to stick with it and try to find ways around the lack of momentum that Torkoal provides.
Well, interested to see how you come back in week 2 and seeing what kind of new additions you're going to bring in your prep. Excited to see what that looks like.
I can't wait to see how your team ends up going, especially with Coquavel. I think that thing is going to be a huge demon paired with things like Garchomp and Florges, so I'm very excited to see what you do as well. And that concludes week 1 of the DLC. A very unfortunate loss for the VDL, but we're hoping to bounce back next week. Let us know down in the comments what you thought of this video. I know I originally said these are going to be coming out on Wednesdays, but we've now had to push them back to Thursdays just because it's taking a little bit more time just with how much effort we have to put in, so anticipate next week being on Thursday as well. But yeah, if you enjoyed, drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys all later. Peace.